Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm the co-owner and creative director of Allegory Gallery in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. And we're joining you from Star Cottage Studio today, which if you don't know what Star Cottage Studio is, it's our biggest project yet that we've undertaken at Allegory Gallery. This is going to be, and it is my future studio. We're still in the process of packing and moving everything up, but it's getting there little by little. It's taking longer than we would have liked, but sometimes, that's the way it is. All right, so yeah, I thought today that we would make some bowls. How about that? So, if you've ever been to Allegory Gallery, you may have seen some of these little copper dishes. Now, we bought these copper dishes, and these are handmade in Africa. And they're really cool. I'm still getting used to StreamYard, so I don't actually know like where the camera is and what angles what. But so these are made in a specific way, and we're gonna talk about some ways. I'm gonna show you certain techniques, and then I'm just gonna describe. I almost sneezed, y'all. So I'm gonna talk about some ways and show others because some of them are a little bit take a little bit longer to do than others, and also I don't really have the setup to do some of the raising techniques just yet. So I'll be describing that, but I'll show you how to make some bowls, and they'll be kind of similar. They'll be a little bit different. I see a couple people have tuned in. Thanks for tuning in. I see Julie's on. Hey, Julie. I see Marianne is on. Hey, Marianne. Michelle is on. Hey, Michelle. Diane is on. Howdy. So the first thing we're going to do before we really get going is we're going to put on our safety equipment. So I've got some goggles and or some eye protection, whatever that is for you. I always think, like, I never used to think about stuff like that. And then, as you get a little bit older, you start seeing things happen, and they're like, oh, that's why you do that. So the next thing I'm going to do is put on my apron because we will be working with fire today. And so, yeah. This, not only do I think it looks cute, but it keeps me from burning my areas and offers an extra layer of protection against doing that. So, yeah. All right. I see a couple more people have tuned in. Hey, Robin. Hey, Terry. Hey, June. Michelle says, yay, more on YouTube. Yay. If you haven't heard, we're trying to get 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel before the end of March. And let me see if I can put that banner up. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. And make sure that you hit your notifications so that whenever we go live or post a new video, you'll be one of the first to get it. We're going to start ramping up doing more on YouTube. I was recently banned from posting lives on my personal account. So luckily we found a workaround going through StreamYard. So that's how I am here with you today. So we're trying to diversify our portfolio, as they say, and not put all of our eggs in one basket. Because then the sad times. So let's not have the sad times. So yeah. All right. So I'll let people trickle a little bit more in, because sometimes it takes a minute or two for folks to find us. So today we had a very productive meeting, or I did. We're pitching a series of pop-up shops in a nearby town, and I think it could be really cool. One of the things that has kind of slowed down in recent years is the foot traffic has dropped a lot in town, and of course we've been going through COVID, and dealing with all that, um, but we've just seen kind of a dip over the years. And so I think the pop-up shops will be really good because it'll expose us to a new group of people and kind of touch bases with um, other people that we don't get to see all the time. So it's like a reminder and saying, hey, we're here, we're still around. Because we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. Or no, we celebrated that in September. So we're on year 10, working on year 11, if that makes any sense. So there's a lot of stuff going on. That's one of them. So the pop-up shop should be once a month. But of course, it's really early. It's too early to really. I probably shouldn't even be saying anything now, but I mean, it's fresh on my brain and I've been thinking about it for all weekend. So, yeah. So, hopefully, if you are local, you'll check it out and participate. I'm sure if you're not local, we'll figure something out so that all of you out there in our community at large can play along too. All right. Brooke says hello from Detroit. Hello. Pamela says hi, Andrew. Hey, Pamela. Sharon says hi, Andrew. Hi, Sharon. And yeah. And Pamela says good advertising for your business. Yeah. So it should be, hopefully, that's the plan. Also, it's a wonderful, okay, I'm just gonna jump right in. So if you are not familiar with the scalp level artists, I recommend you checking them out. And what it was is George Hetzel, I think how you say his name. He was a prominent artist in Pittsburgh. He was trained in Europe and came over. And so he was in Pittsburgh. And what he did is he took artists out to the Johnstown area. And there's an area there called Scalp Level. And it's kind of in between Johnstown and Windber and kind of that area. And they would go out there and paint. So there's a whole school of painting that he kind of kickstarted. And so he would bring artists to the Johnstown area, and they would make sketches and take photos and do prep work, and then bring it back to Pittsburgh or wherever and work on those paintings. But what it's really cool is they're kind of just after the Hudson River Valley artists, which if you're familiar with painting, they're really, really big and super collectible, and in big museums. And so they're a little bit after that, kind of contemporary, but still a little bit after. And this is all after the Civil War. So when you like picture it, don't picture cars, picture like horse and buggy, kind of action. And luckily there was a train that came through here and made it a little bit easier to get here. But yeah, so there's this long tradition of artists bringing artists to this region. It's a beautiful area. And if you are interested, after the video, I'll post a link to a presentation that was done at the Cambria County Library Association. There was a professor who did a really wonderful job kind of explaining the scalp level artists, and talks about how amazing and forward thinking they were for the time. A lot of times, especially during that time period, um, there was it was kind of like a boys' club for the contemporary painting of that time. So one of the things that's kind of cool is that they brought women out to paint, and usually there was some kind of family relation, like his daughter and I believe his wife were amongst the painters. Um, and so it's really cool that they were doing these forward-thinking inclusivity and diversity even back then in the late 1800s. So I think that's pretty cool, at least. So, anyways, there's a long tradition of this kind of, I don't know, the spirit of creativity in the region. So, doing these pop up shops is just another way that we can kind of uh, harness that energy and pay homage to that legacy. So, we're going to have these pop up shops. And of course, in our shop, there's a lot of artisan goods. So, most of the stuff that we carry in Allegory Gallery is artisan goods, or they are materials for artists to create with. Almost 95% is. There's a couple like home decor things that are mass produced, but other than that, everything else is either made by an artist or made for artists to work with. So I think it's really cool that we're going to be able to continue this legacy and hopefully work with a couple economic development groups that will help us further this goal. And, I can't really speak to it yet, if that's going to go or not. And I can't really talk about the logistics of it because it's so early on. But we're on meeting 3 of it. So hopefully that's a good sign. So you'll have to stay tuned here on the Allegory Gallery page, or on our Facebook or wherever. Join our mailing list. I should probably promote that. Where's here? I'm like, where's this? Y'all can't see this. I can see it though. So if you go to allegorygallery.com and you scroll all the way down, go downtown to the very bottom, there should be a place for you to sign up for our newsletter, or it might pop up. It just depends on what kind of device you're on. So make sure you're on our newsletter if you aren't on there yet. And let's see. If you haven't liked our Facebook page for Star Cottage Studio, which is where I'm at now, please do so because that's awesome. We don't really post there as much as we probably should, but mostly we post to our Patreon account. And even if you don't subscribe, if you don't subscribe to a paid tier, you can still head on over to patreon.com/StarCottageStudio, all one word, all lowercase, and see all of the public posts, because most of our posts are our public posts. So you can go over there and see all of our trials and tribulations. And then if you subscribe, then you get little perks. We're in the process of rejigging the Patreon page, so it's a little bit we haven't made all the changes yet, but we will soon. Like there were some tiers that were like small business coaching, and I think we're getting a little bit too busy to do those things. So what we're going to do is I think what we're going to do is make a kind of a standardized one tier fits all kind of thing. And it'll all kind of make everything a little bit easier. So yeah. All right. So I think that may be enough talk. The people who are going to come on are going to come on, have come on. Let's see. I have a couple of different questions. Do a live from the pop-up. I love to see your display. Yeah, that's the plan. But I mean, it's so early that um, we're still in conversations with what they're going to look like. Um, we are going to do it whether or not we get the go ahead from this collaboration that we're trying to work with. But you know, if we do get to get funding and help through a different network, then we'll be able to do more. If it's kind of just a me William project, we are constrained by what we can do with what we have. But I think it'll still be cool. Um, Sandra says, yes, please. Kristen says, where are you? I'm at Star Cottage Studio. Hey, Sharon. Kristen says, looks like good lighting there. Yeah, so that's one of the things that we had done. This room, there were only 2 light bulbs originally. Um, and it was a little dark in here. So one of the projects that we had early on is we went through the cottage and redid, not us, because I'm not an electrician, but one of our friends out there um, came through and they redid all of the electricity in the building and put in new LED lights. So we have a lot of ample lighting, so I'm not, stumbling around trying to find stuff. Kristen says, "Does it feel like home yet?" Yeah, it's getting there. It's gonna take a while. I always underestimate how much work things are gonna be. And I'm just getting to the point where I just can't work as hard as I used to. Like used to, I could stay up for days at a time and work until I passed out and, get up and go again. But nowadays, I can't, the recovery time is much more severe. So I can't quite do that like I used to. So things are taking a lot longer to do than I thought they would. Like some of y'all are waiting for mystery boxes, and it's taking a lot longer because I'm moving my entire bead collection um, over here and then organizing everything. And it's a mess, y'all. Like I thought, it's like, oh, we'll just unpack some boxes and it'll be fun and it'll be fast. No, it's not. It's like coating the whole floor, and I have to like play a game of match. The game where you match things up. Is it Old Maid? I can't remember. But anyways, basically, I'm making piles of like things, and it's taking a very, very long time. But luckily, those are all finished. They should go out tomorrow. I wanted to get them out on Monday, but that didn't work out. And then today, William's at his other job, so they'll go out tomorrow. So if you've been waiting, there you go. There's a surprise. And I made them extra, extra good, so to make up for the delay. So if you had to wait, expect some extra little prizes in your boxes, because I feel bad when we don't get things out quickly, and it's my fault. Really, it's my fault. I could have worked harder, but I it is what it is. So there you go. Jermaine says, I'm so grateful that you give us background information about the artistic side of the Pittsburgh area because it gives a renewed interest and pride of my birthplace. Although I was born and raised there, I knew none of this. Thank you. So it's such a cool, and I actually didn't know a lot of this until I moved here. Um, but it's really it's a really fascinating place when you think about history and especially of our country, because this region was kind of the crucible, literally and figuratively, of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And now we're in a phase where it's very forward thinking in a lot of ways. So, especially in like Pittsburgh, which was known for its steel mills and things like that, now it's becoming known as an art center and a place for technology. There are all these amazing companies that are doing a lot of things. Like Google has a place here, and Duolingo, and there's a bunch of really cool tech companies that are moving in. And of course, with that being said, when you have this big boom of money coming in, and it can be very, I don't want to say dangerous, but it can be problematic because it can displace people who have lived there for generations and then can no longer afford the area. So it's a kind of a negative impact of gentrification. So I think Pittsburgh is trying to be mindful of that and do so moving forward in a way that respects the people who already live here, but also welcomes new people and new innovations and new money, because new money is important, y'all. A lot of those old money families is moving away. So there, it's a really cool place, and I really wish that they would do like a Gilded Age of Pittsburgh, because we're watching the show on HBO right now. It's by the guy that did Downton Abbey, and it's all about New York in the late 1800s, and Thomas Edison is in it for for one of the episodes at least, and it's pretty cool. And it's nice to look at it because it's usually when you get those period pieces, it can be a little bit told from one side. And the nice thing about this show is that it explores multiple perspectives of the time period, whether it's societal class, race, or financial position. So it's pretty cool. And I like it. So, but I wish they would do that in Pittsburgh because I think it's right for that. There are so many stories, and yeah. So maybe we'll entice Julian Fellows to come on out to Ligonier and stay for a while. Write the next series. Hey Renee. Michelle asks, "How is my residency going?" It's okay. The residency itself is going well, but because it is a little bit of a further, because it's a little bit further, I'm not there as much as I would like. But I have other responsibilities, so it's kind of, if I had hair, I'd probably pull it out. It's not gotten too bad yet, but it's definitely a juggling act. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Pittsburgh, and there's stuff going down in Farmington, and then there's stuff in Johnstown, and there's stuff here. So I'm kind of running. But it's going pretty well. I need to keep working on a line of kind of my ready to wear line, I guess. And that helps fund the Pittsburgh, the residency. They do offer a stipend at the residency, so I do get a small amount of money, but I'm spending a lot of money right now. Like I bought a thing of silver, and I thought I almost passed out. It was so expensive, but I have to have the materials to work with, so it is what it is at this point. Hey, Suzanne. Renee says that's what happens when we age. We can't keep going like we did when we were in our 20s. Yeah, that's what happens. And I wish that I had a little bit more get up and go that I used to, but I guess I'm having to get comfortable with the fact that things do take longer now, and I just need to be more realistic with that. Jermaine says it's good to pace yourself. It helps you stay healthy. Yeah, I think that's one of those things that has become more prominent in me and William's minds, at least, is that we need to kind of keep not make ourselves sick, if that makes sense. Because burnout's a really real thing. And, we talk a lot about like the physical demands of certain things, but we don't always talk about like the emotional consequences of things, especially like having a small business in a pandemic. And I know that like a lot of people, they don't even really may think about it, but it's not as easy as some people would make it out. There are some people who make anything like they could be covered in poop and make it sound delightful. Me, I'm a little bit more transparent about things, so I do recognize that, and I've seen within our industry there's a lot of challenges, and people, there's a lot of changes happening, whether you're cognitive of them or not. But there's a lot of changes going on in our community right now of the jewelry making world. And so, yeah, so sometimes change is good, and sometimes change is unavoidable, but it's less than delightful. Diane said they ordered a small mystery box and totally forgot about it until you mentioned it. So don't be too worried about mine. Well, they're all done now, so it's out of my hair. They'll start going out tomorrow. So hallelujah, hallelujah. Let me just say, that's one last thing that's been weighing on my mind. I always feel guilty about that kind of stuff because, we go into it with a good intention, and then whenever I feel like I'm letting people down, I always feel bad about that. But one of the things I'm kind of learning is that sometimes if you dwell on that feeling of kind of like dread, then it just makes it even harder to do it. So the best thing to do is acknowledge the issue and move forward and try to do your best. And you're not going to make everybody happy, and but the people who will or who do appreciate it, the people who get it will appreciate it. Jermaine said that's what happened in the Bay Area. The cost of housing and living is crazy, and the tech industry has a lot to do with it. Yeah, we've seen that. My friends are live there and are getting pushed out. One of my friends, she is doing van living now because she can't afford her apartment anymore. And at first, I was super concerned for her, but she was on the road so much before anyway that it almost made sense for her. So, I think it's hard for me because I'm setting down so many roots, and we're kind of acquiring all these like physical ties to the land that it's hard for me to imagine that. But, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to make it work. Miss Shell said, "Oh, same, love that show." Renee says there is a lot of old money right there in the Ligonier area. Yeah, there is, but it's not. It's different. And I don't want to get too much into that because some of them might be watching, and it's not for me to talk about their private business. But it's a lot of the newer generations don't have the same connections that some of the older generations did. So I don't know how to put that any other way than that, but like they're like some of the people are moving away from here and going to other places. So other places they were like ride or die for Ligonier. But yeah. Renee said the travel costs right now cannot be easy. Pittsburgh is just a bit of a drive from Ligonier. Yeah, so it is more expensive, especially because I never used to leave the house, so anything's more expensive. But it is adding up. The fuel is not too bad. I think it's about $4 um, a gallon for regular. Um, it's not as cheap as it could be, but I'm also not hiding from bombs right now, so I'll pay the extra dollar. Um, Renee says, that's Libra in you with the transparency. If it is on my mind and tongue, it will be said, no filter. Me too. I try to filter what I say, especially on the business. I actually say a lot of bad words in real life. So sometimes these lives are a challenge for me because I'm very expressive with my language. Um, and as I've been recently corrected, uh, and I'm not going to go into it, but with the I got the slap down, and now I can't post for 14 days. I can't post lives, and all of my content is bumped down significantly. So if you go to my Instagram, you can see where, especially in the reels, where there's like tons of watching, and then boom, they drop significantly. So you can kind of see it, and it sucks, but what can you do? Anyways, let's make some bowls. William does the let's chat stuff. Me, I'm like, let's do a project. I'm all like twitching. We went to this event the other night, and apparently, I'm out of practice talking to people because I went on and on about the outhouse for like 25 minutes. And people are like, did that dude just talk about burning poop for 25 minutes? And I was like, yes, I did. And William's like, you need to stop doing that because we're going to be called like the burning poop boys. And I don't want to get that. I don't want to get that tagged on to my name. So I'm like, well, it is what it is. I've had to spend a lot of research looking up these waste management options for the cottage. So that's just gonna be what it is. And he was like, great, super. Um, Jermaine says, I'm a Libra and I'm always have to say what is my truth. I'm not good at sugarcoating or filtering when I speak. I'm not really good at either. Apparently, like you all can tell. If you follow me or are friends with me privately, y'all know that I have a real problem with that. Um, if I see something wrong-headed, I'm like, no, you shall not pass, and then aggressively go after it. Anyways, Renee says, I am in Facebook low feed for 100 days because I am naughty. Well, I'm on for 14 more days, so hopefully, knock on wood, ends after that. And then I won't say things, and I'll try to become as homogenous as homogenous can be. And then all the flavor will get sucked out of my talk, and then I'll be like, oh boy, here comes a vanilla toast. Here he goes. So anyways, vanilla toast aside, um, we're going to make some bowls. We're not going to make exactly this because this is actually kind of hard to do and specialized to do. Um, and if you can see, there's a rolled edge on this, which is actually pretty tricky. So we're not going to do that. But what we are going to do is some variations of that. So the first thing you're going to do is start off with a sheet of copper. Thankfully, I can buy these copper blanks already done, and they come in different sizes. This is a 3-inch across copper disc, and I believe it's 18 gauge metal. Now, in your mind, you may be thinking that thinner metal works better. No. And I'm sorry, I'm going to burst that bubble. And you're going to be like, why'd you burst my happy bubble if thinner metal equals better? And the reason why is because every time you hit this, it gets thinner. So eventually it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and weaker and weaker and weaker. And it's kind of like when you take a pop tab and you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then eventually breaks. So you have to start off with something with enough metal so that it can move, and you have enough allowance so that whenever you're making your shapes, however you do it, whether it's sinking or raising, you will have it won't bust through. Because it's almost like when you bust through metal, it's almost like when you get like a piece of construction paper and you start folding it and folding it and folding it. And even if you anneal it, then you'll still see where it wears thin. And we don't necessarily want to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to anneal this piece of copper. If you watched last week's demo, I did a long demo on chasing and repoussé, and I didn't even get into the pitch pot. And y'all be like, I thought he was gonna do the pitch pot. I was like, it's getting on like 3 hours here, y'all. I don't know if you're all that serious. But if you are interested in seeing what I made last week, I posted a picture of that. And if you go to my Instagram, which is Andrew T. Thornton, that's THORNTON 100. Like if you got a 100 on your test, then you can see that. Let me see if I have a banner for that. I'm all about these banners. It's like so fancy. William didn't make me a banner, so I guess not. I guess you have to just picture it in your mind. Cynthia says, you get that from Dad. Oh, great. All right. So put on your safety glasses. Safety first, y'all. Glasses, guess what? Cheap. You can get them like $6 on the internet. Your real eyeballs, if something pokes into those, not cheap. Even if you have insurance, not cheap. And then plus, then you have eye damage. So put on your safety glasses, protect yourself, and make sure you're crafting with care. Hey, there you go. I should write jingles or something. And then also, I mentioned put on your apron. All right, I'm going to turn this around and unplug this. And hopefully I don't lose everybody in the middle of this. And y'all are like, whoa, what happened? Because I'm still learning how to use this StreamYard. All right. Layout. Layout, settings. No. Settings. Camera. Front. Back. All right. You can see my junky studio. It's not too bad, but it is what it is. All right, I'm going to put this in front of the camera so that you don't get the motion sickness. In my mind, that means you're not going to get the motion sickness. It kind of looks like a sunset. All right, and I'm going to adjust this a little bit lower so that you get a better view. And then I'm going to put that so that you can see what's happening. All right, I've had this going, but this is just a little fan. It's got a carbon filter in it. And once it warms up and we get a little extra money, I'm going to put real ventilation in here. So that's next on our list of things to do. I'm going to try to get a nice setup so that I don't, get the brain cancer or anything. So anyways, I'm just going to put this on. I've got my torch set up. Now, when you're working with the bigger pieces of metal, you need the bigger torch head. Let me just tell you about that, because if you use this one, this zero size torch head, you're going to be doing this for all eternity, and it's still not going to get annealed. So move up to the bigger size. This might be actually a little too big. This is number 2 size on the Smith torch. This is an acetylene oxygen torch. I have a Smith light, but I haven't set that up, and I need to for when I do more fine things. But anyways, so here you go. You've got this torch. I have a fire extinguisher behind me. It's super important to have fire safety. I've got these cross-locking tweezers. Now, these ones are a little bit tricky. They're a little bit counterintuitive to use, because your brain says, you have to practice with them. It's kind of like chopsticks, except a little bit easier, but just practice with them until you're comfortable picking stuff up. And it's good to get the ones with a little wood, because metal conducts heat, and if you don't, you can burn yourself. And also, it's good to be expedient in your motions, because if you are slow and contemplating life and thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, it's more likely than not you're going to get burned. So work with um, uh, an efficient uh, pep to your step. And I'm one to talk, because I am one of those people who's like, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? And we're going to probably have Indian, because we had some delicious Indian food in Monroeville the other night, and that's been on my mind. So anyways, so the other thing we're going to need is a quench pot. And there's a couple things that you can do to expedite this process, or make it so you know exactly what's what. You can put a little line of Sharpie, which I'm going to do. Let me get the Sharpie. And you can also put on a little bit of flux. And what these do is they tell us, they're little indicators of when the metal is fully annealed. So the Sharpie will disappear. And actually, let me get this so you can actually see this. Whoa, y'all. It's like we're in the future. So this Sharpie will disappear, and this flux will go glossy, and those are 2 indicators of how you know the metal is annealed. The other way is that this metal will turn a dull red. The only issue with that is that when they came out with that kind of tool to know when the metal was annealed, it was like ye old candle style up in here. So it was a darker room. So if you think about it, if you have all this ambient light that's all LED lights, you're not going to get the same kind of reading as if you were in a lower light condition. So, yes, do look for a red color, but that kind of dull red, which is in all these different books, is kind of subjective, because what's dull red? Maybe you're colorblind. You don't know. I saw this one thing on Forge in the Fire, and the dude was colorblind. He couldn't tell when the annealing temperature, so he came up with his own system, and I can't remember what it was. I think it was like salt or something was burning, was annealing temperature, or I can't remember. But anyways, the other thing to look back look for when you're annealing your metal. And annealing the metal means heating it up until it's in its most relaxed, softest state. So the other thing to look for is when you're hitting it with a torch, you're going to hit it with the very tip of the blue flame. If you get closer to the nozzle, a lot of times people think that the closer to the nozzle is the best, but the problem with that is actually no, you're getting too much feedback from the oxygen. So the hottest part of your flame is that invisible point on the tip of the blue cone inside your flame. That's going to be the hottest part and is going to get the work done faster. Now, one thing you're also going to do is you're going to move around the entire piece and use slow, steady movements and force the heat around. If you stick in one spot, you're going to burn it, and you're also not going to anneal the whole thing. The other thing that's a possibility is that copper oxidizes, and you'll the oxidation happens when you move that flame cone away from the copper. The that flame is no longer eating that oxygen, so it will react with the air and create a thick layer of fire scale. Now, fire scale, which is the blackening surface of copper when it's heated, happens anyway. It will happen regardless. However, if you there are ways of making there be less fire scale. Now, you may be wondering why it really matters. And one of the reasons why it matters is because when you're working with other metals, like sterling silver, for example, if you don't properly anneal your metal and keep the oxidation down, you'll get something called fire stain. And fire stain is different from fire scale. Fire scale is the blackening of the surface. Fire stain is when the metal, the other metals inside of so sterling silver is an alloy. It's not a pure metal. Copper is a pure metal. Fine silver is a pure metal. Sterling silver is an alloy. It's mostly silver, but there is some copper in there and some other things depending on who makes it. So whenever you heat something up, sometimes what happens is those elemental particles kind of separate. This can be good because if you want to do something called depletion gilding, you can do that. And that's basically making a surface of fine silver on your sterling silver, which is useful if you're enameling or if you're going to go and do kimbo or whatever, or if you just want it to be bright and shiny on the surface. Now, as I was mentioning, if you don't heat your metal up properly, you can get fire staining. And fire staining, the only way to really take it out is to grind it out. And if you have a thin piece, you may not be able to do it. So, and the fire staining, it looks like a purple bruise all along through the metal. So if you don't want that and you want it to be nice and shiny and be all one color and not look like somebody punched it in the face, then you need to be mindful of how you anneal your metal and work with your flame. And I know this is all technical information, but it is helpful to know. Sometimes people are like, just heat it up and put it in the water and you're done. And then there's a lot of different, I could go on and on about this, but there is different conjecture about how the best way is to cool your piece. For if you're working with steel, you will let things air cool, and at your last thing that you do, you'll quench it. But with a lot of people who work with copper, they'll anneal their metal and then just quench it in water. That's what we're going to do. But another variation of that, if say you don't have a quench pot with you, you can take a steel block, which seems harder to find to me than a bowl that's non-flammable with water in it. But you can take a steel block and put that on there, and that steel will soak up the heat and take it away from the copper piece that you're working on. So that's another way that you can quench a piece, is by steel. You can also air cool it. I know some people who do a lot of like chasing and repoussé work and raising and different things like that. They won't quench at all in water, and they only steel cool or air cool. So before we get too far in, Rona says, what gauge is the copper disc? It's 18 gauge. All right. So I'm going to turn the gas on, and I start further back so that I can evaporate off some of the flux. And I'll get closer and closer. The flux will turn into a powdery white. And as it heats, it will become glassy. And that's an indicator that we are closer to annealing temperature. We're almost there. Okay, there's that orange flame. Do you see it? Kind of orange and green. All right, I turn this off. I'm putting this on a non-flammable surface. I'm going to grip this with my cross-locking tweezers. I'm going to go further in. You'll notice I didn't grab it just by the end, and I'll put it in the quench pot. Now, if you quench a lot of pieces, this water will get hot, and it can actually get to boiling temperatures. It's basically like, you know, if you go to those fancy spas, they'll heat the water by heating rocks and putting the hot rocks in the water. And that, I don't know why. Maybe they don't have the hot function, or they want it to get really hot. But so this is what it looks like when it's fresh out of the quench. And you'll see on the back, there's all that fire scale. Now, if you want to get rid of this, there are a couple different options. You can use Penny Bright. That's a really good one. Or you can use a pickle pot. Now, I've got my pickle pot going, but guess what? I pre-did some pieces. I annealed the pieces, so we don't have to wait all day for it to be done. So I'm going to let that sit on the side, and then we'll go over and talk a little bit about our forming structures. All right, let me lower this down so you're not blinded by the light. And I'm going to look through the comments real quick in case I miss anything. All right. Brindy says, I'm going to attempt this summer. Oh, good. All right. So here are the copper pieces that have been annealed and have been cleaned in the pickle. Now, as a rule of thumb, it's good to get in the habit of only touching your pieces on the sides and very rarely. It's also good if you have gloves and different things like that. It's good to get in the habit of picking up your metal in a very careful way. And the reason why I say that is because one of the key things of keeping or of doing enameling is keeping your metals clean and free of oils. I don't know about you, but I am a very prolific oil maker in my body. So I'm very oily. My hands are oily sometimes. I like to think of it as nature's moisturizer, which it is, but nature's moisturizer and enameling don't mix. So if I wanted to enamel this piece, which I probably won't get around to tonight, um, I will want to make sure that I touch this as little as possible. Now, sometimes you don't really have a choice. So if you have to touch it, oh well, you can always clean it again. It's not the end of the world, but it is good to get in the habit of not leaving a bunch of fingerprints. Now, one of the things you can do while it's in this annealed, softened state is you can stamp this and you can add decorative finishes to it and add texture to it, and kind of jazz it up. Now, if you want, there are different stamps, which is a whole other video unto itself. But there are a lot of ways that you can stamp the metal and add a decorative surface. Like this is a stamp that you can buy, but you can also make these. And you may, if you are interested in making these, Matthew Chimene, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of his last name, he wrote a really wonderful book called The Art of Stamping, and he goes through how to make your own stamps. I was super fortunate, and was able to take a virtual class with him on stamp making, which was really cool. And I need to, when I get a little bit of time, I'm going to sit down and make some of my own. So, but if you don't have the access to him in a virtual class, you can always get his book, and it has a lot of that information in there. But anyways, you line it down, you hit it, and you make some patterns, and that's neat. We're not going to do that because we don't really have that much time tonight. I have other things I have to do before dinner. So unfortunately, we won't be able to do that tonight. But just know that that's an option. You don't have to have just plain bowls. Now, let's talk about surfaces that we can use to form our bowls. Now, this is a process called sinking. So when somebody says they're going to sink a bowl, this is what they're talking about. So there's this is a steel metal swage block. SWAGE, swage. It is usually used in a lot of like blacksmithing. This one I still need to dress it, which basically means I have to grind out all this texture and make it nice and smooth because it has a factory finish to it. But I just haven't gotten a chance to do that yet. And the other option that we have is a wood dapping block. Now, these are big dapping blocks that are the size for bowls. You can get, depending on what size you use, will determine how high your bowl goes. So, if you have something like this, which is a regular dapping block, it's not going to be big enough, and you're going to end up making this weird kind of protrusion in the base, but it will be deeper. Whenever you're using one of these, it's always good to have a sandbag or something like that so that you can deaden the sound so that when you're hitting it, it doesn't rattle your brain apart. Now, if you are doing this, I do recommend wearing hearing protection. I can't stress it enough. I'm starting to lose my hearing, and it's not awesome. So, and that's that's been a long time coming, but it's definitely more so than it used to be. So definitely, if you can use hearing protection, use it. There, I have these for hearing protection. But you can also use those little orange things, those little earplugs. They work okay. You can still hear stuff, but it does deaden the sounds that cause the hearing damage. So just keep that in mind. I like you to be as safe as possible so that you're making as long as possible, and you can make for a very long time. All right, so you've got your choice between wood form and steel. Now, why would somebody do steel and why would somebody do wood? Um, One of the reasons why somebody would do steel is if they need to manipulate a very hard metal and they need to move that metal quickly. So if you have like steel that you're moving, you'd want to do that. But you can also use wood. There's a stump and you heat it up and you get it nice and bright orange. And then you use that stump to manipulate the texture. Texture is not the right word, it's form. And you'd also, when you're using a hammer, you've got two ends of your hammer. You have the compression end and you have the flaring end. This is the ball peen hammer, and this is the peen part. And this spreads the metal out. Um, if you're working with steel, this is a great option. If you're working with copper, this is probably uh, too aggressive unless you're working hot. We're not going to be working hot today. We're going to be working with annealed metal because it's way easier. So you'll need a hammer like this. And they have different kinds. You can get a rawhide mallet like this. If you do, you have to shape it because this is not going to fit in some of the holes, and then you're basically not doing anything. The other thing is that when you get a new rawhide mallet, you do have to abrade the outside of your hammer. And I didn't know this for years, and I was like, they talk about how the rawhide mallet's not going to go and mess up my thing, or but it's messing up my metal and leaving marks on my metal anyway. And what I didn't realize is that when they make and manufacture rawhide mallets, they kind of basically soak it in an adhesive, and the ends are covered in that kind of adhesive. And that adhesive hardens super hard. So you have to take that layer off and kind of sand it or grind it or rub it on the concrete or whatever to kind of get that edge off, that coating on the ends of your rawhide mallet, so that it's not going to leave marks and is nice and supple and won't mar up your metal super bad. But for this project, it's good to have a hammer or a mallet like this because you've got a nice thin end and you have a roundish bulbous end that kind of fits into the depression of the bowl. Now, if you are saying, hey, that looks a little bit familiar, one of the things you can do is if you are located near an auto parts store that does body work or specializes in people who do body work, they have hammers that look very similar to this. Usually, they're actually cheaper than jewelry hammers, but they're basically the same thing, and they come in different sizes and shapes. And there's all kinds of hammers that you can use to take the dent out of a metal. If your husband or partner or whatever has kind of the mechanical mind and they fix cars, or if you fix cars or whatever, sometimes you can kind of borrow one of these if you don't want to get, but they're not too expensive. So whenever you're sinking a bowl, you're taking a piece that's flat and forming it into the shape. So it's forming into it. You're sinking the metal down into the shape. Now, this is different than if you're raising the form. Now, when they talk about raising, and we're not going to get into this because I don't have my vise set up yet, and you need a vise or some way to hold this stake. But there are all kinds of stakes, and this is one of them. So this will sit in a vise, or it might sit in your hardy hole on your anvil, somewhere that it will fit, and then you can, where you don't have a lot of stuff hanging and blocking this, you can't like just stick this in a table in the middle of the table because you won't have any surface room to get underneath your piece. So this is a stake. They come in all different kinds, shapes and sizes. Like these are mini ones. These are mini stakes from frets. And those work if you're going to make like a tiny, tiny little bowl. Or if you're going to make bracelets or bezels or things that with thin gauge metal that are small. But these get great big, and sometimes people have hundreds of these to fit every single shape and size. I've only just started collecting the bigger ones. So I only have 4 or 5 of those. But if you are interested in those, sometimes you can check out old auctions and different things like that, or auctions of old farm equipment and things like that, because they are a little bit tricky to find because they're not really manufactured that much anymore. And if people do manufacture them, they usually do them like one-offs, and they make them just for themselves. And then, you're kind of like, you have to make your own, basically. And I don't have a forge yet, so I can't make that. So, to raise a piece of metal, the first thing you do is you find your center point. So you make an X or a star pattern, and you find the dead center. You'll score that with a center punch, and then you'll use your dividers to make concentric circles on the outside. And those are your guides to let you know where you're at. So at first, it may not make a lot of sense because you can see it, but of where you hit. But sometimes when you get further along, it's harder to tell if you completed a row or not. So when you look at a bowl like this, you can see all the rows that they went with their hammer. So they had a hammer that was a smallish hammer, and you can see like where they had that. Now, if we were actually raising it, your stake would be in a position like this, and you could adjust it so that it fits the curvature, and you'd hit it like that. Now, that's a very simplified version of that, how to do that. I took a class, and it was a week long. And yeah. So the other thing that you can use to help you to get the curvature that you want is there is a thing called a mushroom stake. And a mushroom stake will look like this. Sometimes they're a little bit flatter, but this will help make a bowl shape. So there's that. And we'll actually I'll demonstrate how to do that. But let's get on to the bowl making because it's really satisfying once it's done. So if you're going to do this, position this. Of course, I picked the most rickety table of the two tables. So position this where whatever you're going to be hitting is over the leg of the table. I'll zoom back so you can see this. And the reason why is if you go and you put it in the middle of a table, especially if you're like on, say, at a show and you're teaching and they only have the plastic tables, if you don't position over the leg of the table, you're going to get all kinds of wobbly. It's going to be the double impression. It's going to look terrible. So do yourself a favor and position whatever you're going to be striking over the leg of the table. Now, the other option is to put it on top of an anvil like I do. But if you don't have one, then, you don't have one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my sandbag down. You can also use a sandbag to make these bowls. It's not as fast, though, and it's not as precise. So if you want something that's more organic looking and less machined looking, then, I shouldn't say like less machined looking because it's going to still look handmade. But if you want to make something that's more rustic and has a little bit more organic flair to it, you can use a sandbag and just kind of manipulate it so that you have a depression in the sandbag and then you just kind of move it around. I think that's a pain in the butt, so that's why I don't do it. Now, whenever you're positioning your metal in the form, you start with the largest size first, and it's almost opposite of what you do when you raise. When you raise, you start from the inner part and you go out, and when you sink, you go inward. So you take your hammer. I got the pointy end, and I'm just gonna strike around the edge. And that kind of gets it so that it's not gonna weeble wobble everywhere. And I'm gonna hit more firmly. And I can also twist this. Now I wanna be careful because I don't wanna put my fingers in between like this edge and the copper because it can pinch you and then you're gonna be less than happy. Now, when you're holding it, I like to hold it further back. And because if you hold it like this, it's called choking the hammer, which can be good if you need a less intense blow. However, if you want, make your mallet do the work. So hold it further back. Also, when you're holding it, don't hold it like this. Sometimes people will do this because they think it will control the hammer. And actually, it's just sending that reverberation through your finger into that knuckle. And then when this knuckle is like the size of an egg and you got the arthritis in it, and then it's going to hurt like hellfire, then yeah, that's less than desirable. All right. So this is a very shallow dish. And if you want it to be deeper, you'll move it up to a bigger or a smaller size. Now, you can get several rounds before you have to anneal it again. You'll know when you have to anneal it again because it will sound differently. When you anneal it, or when it gets work hardened after you make the blows, it will have a different sound. When it's annealed and it's kind of being hit with air behind it, it will have a very satisfying kind of thump sound. When it's work hardened, it will have a more it'll have like a clackier sound. So this is how you dome that. Now what I'm going to do before I get to the point where I have to anneal it again is I'm going to take this over to my anvil. Let me adjust this a little bit. And then you'll place this over here and then work. You can also put it up on the edge like this. Now, a trick to get this to round out even faster is there's a thing that looks almost like a fork like this, and you can put it in here and you twist it. And that will rapidly raise up the metal. And then whenever you go around and do your other hits, your strikes, your stanzas or whatever, you'll focus on just the high points after that. So as you can see, it's already starting to develop into a bowl. You can also see where the shiny parts are. This is where the metal is coming in contact with the dome of the stake. That eventually will be called planishing. When you have metal on metal contact and you're using it to smooth the surface, that's called planishing. Now when I'm holding it like this and I'm hitting it here so I don't accidentally hit myself. So it's already starting to take on that shape. It does take a while. So it's slowly forming into that bowl shape. As you can see, it's starting to get work hardened. It's not quite fully work hardened completely yet, but it is getting there. So you do have to be mindful of not overworking it when it's not work hardened or when it's not anneal, because what you're doing is you're basically making your life harder. The other thing I should mention is that this happens gradually. So it's not something that you can just do and then it's done. It's something that you have to keep doing and refine the shapes until you get where you need to go. So it's not something that you just stick it on and then just do done. If you had a hydraulic press, you could get this done in like one, you could get this done a lot quicker because you're having a full force all the way across. But with this, you're manipulating the metal one blow at a time. So it is something that takes a little bit longer. So if you're super impatient, this one may not be for you. But if you want it to get even like the walls super high, then you'll want to. We're at a point where we probably could anneal. It's gotten pretty work hardened, which is good. You don't want a big floppy bowl. But so you would just go and anneal this, just like we did at the beginning of this video, and then clean it again. You want to make sure that your metal is super clean and that it's dry. That's important to as something to remember. You want your metal to be dry, because if you get water in contact with your steel, it's going to rust your steel. And wherever there's rust, it will telegraph, which means that texture will be on this piece. If it's on this, it'll be on this. So we can try to get away with not having hammer marks by using a plastic hammer or a nylon hammer. But if you have marks on your steak, you're going to have marks on your piece. So sometimes if you want to polish this up before you get started, that's a good thing to do. You would start with the lowest grit and go to the highest grit. So start with something like a 220, then a 320, then a 400, I think, then 600. You can go up to 1,000, 2,000, just as smooth as you want it to, because the more refined this is, the more refined this is. So basically you would keep going, and then eventually when you get done, you don't want your piece to weeble wobble. And this steak has a flat spot right here. So that's it makes your piece sit flat, so it's not all like whoa. So it'll have a flat spot. If your piece is perfectly round, I've seen people use like a trailer hitch to do this, and it's more rounded. If your piece is more rounded, you can then go back over with a flat piece, say one of these. This is a rounded piece. This is a dapping punch, but this on the flat side, you can put it in the base here like so, and then hit this, and that will make a flat spot right here. I'm not really ready to do that right now, But that is an option of how to do that. Now, if you don't have one of these hammers, which I think is super handy, you can use a dapping punch, but you just have to have something else to hit it. You have to have that rawhide mallet or whatever, but it will change the surface of your metal. You can hear the difference, right? It's starting to make a more clattering sound. Now, you don't want to take this big punch and go directly in the middle and just start hammering, because you will get this big swell in there. So it's important to kind of just move your piece around. Also, this is a little high for me. In reality, this should be lower than me. And my body, let me zoom over here again. So whenever you've got anvil, you want to take your hand and ball it up and make a fist. And it should be, there's a rug here, so it's a little bit higher, but it should be brushing the tops of your knuckles. So this is a little bit high as well. But when you're hitting, you want your arm to make an L shape like this. If your piece is high, it's going to cause fatigue in your shoulder and mess up your shoulder, especially if you do that like a lot. So it's important to get that the right height. So if you're using this, I'm going to put a piece of urethane down so it doesn't clatter. But this is good where ear protection is super helpful. And I'm just going to pretend like I finished going all the way around. But basically, that's how you make that kind of bowl. And like I said, it's a slow process. If I want this to be really high, like this bowl, I've got to anneal it and keep going. Somebody asked to move the banner. All right. Well.